play the music, and we're going to start connecting to YouTube, okay?
Sounds great.
So no more swearing, gentlemen.
Yeah, Jim.
Yeah. Everyone's ears are all right in there?
Yeah.
Can hear you.
Yeah.
Good.
People can see us.
Yeah, so we are live on YouTube.
Awesome.
But we're going live to Facebook next. So I want to thank anyone who might be joining us. The show will be starting very soon here. We got a wonderful show this evening. Got Matt Burke in the close enough. Jim Schultz, running for Minnesota AG. Very affable, nice guy so far. So it's, not everybody fits that profile. So congratulations, Jim. But yeah, all right, guys. When you connect the chat, we'll be ready in about 1 minute to start.
All right.
About 20 seconds.
The days of the suits.
That's right.
Did you wear a lot of suits, Jai?
Tried not to.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Suits make me look older.
The show is all yours.
Welcome to Black and Blue with AK and Officer Jai. I am AK Kamara.
I'm Jai Hansen.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing great. We have a great show lined up today. If this is your first time listening or watching, we're Black and Blue, and the reason we have that name is because in the world of politics and popular culture, there are times in which we get beat up. Maybe it's because of the position that you hold. Maybe it's because of a belief system that you've professed with your mouth. But we want to always have interesting conversations with people that do get beat up in pop culture, in the mainstream, and have some meaningful conversations around that. And today is no different. We have someone that, if you've paid attention at all to Minnesota politics, you know that there's this scary guy who's keeps on ascending to different levels of office. I've known of his name forever. I'm not going to even say his name because it's not worth it to me. But he is running against him to represent Minnesotans in the position of Attorney General. So today we are bringing a candidate that we hopefully that you can get to know and love as much as we do. Jim Schultz, welcome to the show, Jim.
Great
you
to be
an
with
open
you
like
guys.
that, man?
Yeah, that was a good open.
That was pretty
I like
good.
it.
Yeah,
That's right. It's good to be on with you. And I was just saying before we started here, this is quite the professional podcast. It's great to be on with you. I appreciate the opportunity here. So.
We really do try. We actually had this awesome neon sign coming today, and it just, we couldn't get it to work quite right. So shout out to my wife. Thank you for driving for an hour to bring me the sign. Don't kill me because it's not up. I promise. But
I mean, you have to owe her something for that. Maybe like a foot rub or something. Right?
Yes, I actually do owe her at least a 30-minute foot rub. So
is that 30 minutes per foot?
No, altogether. It's a cumulative total. So now all of our listeners can keep me, hold my feet to the fire while I am rubbing her feet.
Well, it's an excuse for me to come back. I can come back again when you have the sign up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can tell you all about it.
Yeah.
Jim, before we started, I think it's something I want to even bring it up is because there's an aspect to being in the political field that people create like these caricatures of who you are, right? Like you become like, this not real human, right? you might have a position, you might have said something, and someone thinks of you different. And I think that it's always interesting to point out how small worlds can be. And we were talking earlier that I know a family, and you know the same family, and it's not because of our political anything. Yeah. It's just everyday people. And so I wanted to just bring that up because I think there's so much more that connects us with who we are as people than kind of the way that we're drawn. And I just think that that's interesting. So shout out to the Millis family. What is up? You guys are amazing people. Kind of down that same vein, a lot of people are going to have political feelings one way or another. But can you kind of tell me, like, why did you want to actually run for office? Not specifically like AG, but just that call to run and represent the people's interests. Yeah,
it's a good question. In a lot of ways, like, this race made zero sense for my wife and I. We've got 3 little girls, 7, 3, and 1. We haven't slept in about 4 years, to be honest with you. I was in a comfortable spot professionally, and so, like, from a personal perspective, it made zero sense. I thought maybe at some point in my life I would run for public office, but it would be like certainly, girls out of the house, me having been well along in my career and so forth. But we just kind of felt called to step forward at this current moment in our history. We've all seen it. I think a lot of people feel. I certainly feel that we're just losing the state we've known and loved here in Minnesota. And it starts with really the violent crime. We're living through the greatest increase in violent crime in many, many decades. And when I look out at our state's leadership, starting with Keith Ellison, I felt like we didn't have the leadership we needed. We have an attorney general who backed defunding the police, the Minneapolis Charter Amendment, to deconstruct the largest police force in the state. My view was that was remarkably reckless and disturbing. And you go down the list, and we felt like there had to be change in that office, and that we could that I could help deliver it. But it's certainly a joint decision with my wife Molly and I, which felt like we both had to step up. And so that was the background.
Yeah, I think that's important. I also think it's powerful, to that point that you're mentioning, Jai, what is it from your perspective, like law enforcement, that you look at an attorney general in general, like just when you're looking at who they are, is it something that you view as like, adversarial? Because it feels like that's what it's been.
Well, it has been the last 4 years, absolutely. I mean, we have an attorney general right now that has shown over and over again that he does not support public safety, even though it's election time, and now he's kind of changing his tune a little bit. And we'll dive into that. How many days out are we from the election right now?
We're 19 days out here now.
So how are you feeling about the election? How are you feel? Like, are you tired? Are you? Tell me a little bit about the campaign fatigue. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit.
Well, I've got plenty of Red Bull and plenty of coffee, so that's certainly keeping me conscious. But 19 days out, we're on track to win this race. We got to keep fighting, keep working hard. But a poll just came out a little while ago today that had us up by 5 points.
Wow.
So we're in the driver's seat here, and we just got to keep working hard, stay at it, not take anything for granted. But I'd be lying to say if I wasn't, occasionally a little bit tired on the race. It's we've been all over the state. Just thousands of miles. Going anywhere and everywhere. We'll be traveling again this weekend with an event in St. Cloud and elsewhere. But just working hard to make sure we get it done. I tell my team every day, failure is not an option. We have to win. We have to win for the future of our state, for our kids, our grandkids. And so we just have to, do whatever it takes to make sure it happens. And, we can sleep a little bit afterwards. But for now, we just got to keep working hard.
So that conviction that you just talked about, that you have to win, I imagine that when you first started and you announced that has been a much more growing, if you want to say, like, almost not burden, that's probably not the right way to describe it, but like when you're out there and you're talking to people and you see that there's this need, is this kind of something that's just developed and you just feel like you have to do this for the people?
Yeah. I mean, there's people, the people who support you and say, like, they trust you to get it done. And I certainly feel it when I talk to men and women in law enforcement who feel like, there isn't anybody I've met in law enforcement who doesn't feel like there's a target on their backs right now, because they have an attorney general's office that is remarkably hostile to what they do every day. Remarkably hostile. I mean, the Kim Potter case being a representative example, upcharging Kim Potter she made a serious mistake, but the Attorney General's office, upcharged her to first-degree manslaughter and prosecuted her aggressively. And it's cases like that. It's backing defunding the police and so forth, where police, for the first time, I think in Minnesota's history, they don't feel like they have an Attorney General who is anything but hostile. And so I feel the burden of that. I feel the burden of people in North Minneapolis, other troubled neighborhoods, who feel like they've been left behind. They feel like the so-called leadership in our state has failed them so dramatically because they're living in communities where they're wondering if they're going to get shot on the way to school, and that is an absolute disgrace. It burns me up inside. No Minnesotan should have to wonder if they're going to get shot on the way to school or get carjacked going to the grocery store, and then so many people feel that way now.
Jim, I got to ask you, from a police officer's perspective, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah.
Last 4 years have been pure hell when it comes from the kind of support we've been getting from the Attorney General, and it's pretty clear anybody in law enforcement understands that. Yeah, you have a lot of work to do, and how to repair those relationships with public safety, and what steps are you going to take?
Yeah. Well, I'd say number one, you can't do the really bad things. You can't do the really bad things like deliver fundamentally political justice, like Keith Ellison has done. You saw it in the Kim Potter case, where it wasn't about the underlying law or the underlying act. It was about the politics around it, and he upcharged her because of the politics. And so we need an Attorney General that's focused on doing justice every day of the week and not treating police any different than anybody else out there. And so you can't do that. We can't do things like just deconstructing the largest police force in our state. But alongside that, we got to do really constructive things. We have to, I want to create within the office, law enforcement liaison position where
we'll talk about the office a little bit. Talk about how many lawyers are in the office, the oversight that you would have with that office.
Yeah. So there's roughly 150 or so attorneys in the office. The office does a variety of things. One key piece should be the criminal division of the office. It used to be sizable. It used to support the work of county attorneys around the state, the work of law enforcement around the state, and that is now only 3 criminal prosecutors, only 3 in a state of, that's right, 3 people in a state of 5.5 million people, 87 counties. It's an absolute outrage, and that Keith Ellison hasn't responded to this current moment of historic crime by increasing the size of that division. He hasn't. He's sat on his hands, and so we need to dramatically increase the size of that. There's other priorities in the office: consumer protection, a charities division that oversees nonprofits. There's other things we have to do, but on the criminal side, we have an Attorney General's office that is dramatically under-resourced for what we need to do right now. Because the greatest challenge our state faces is dealing with historic violent crime. And the Attorney General's office in Minnesota has been missing in action throughout. The Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher has used that term exactly, missing in action throughout this historic crisis. And so we have to have an Attorney General's office that is partnering with law enforcement to aggressively prosecute violent crime. I know so many people in law enforcement who feel so frustrated they'll pick up somebody one night and then see them out committing the exact same crime a few nights later. We cannot have that. That is, and the victims, feel it too. People being victimized by people who should be in prison, in jail, or otherwise. And right now, we have so-called leaders who are facilitating this, and it's an absolute outrage.
So I like to wax philosophy once in a while, and I think it's important to try and break things down into a way that people that don't really care about this stuff from like a philosophical standpoint can try and better understand it. So there's a clear difference of a belief of how society works between you and Keith Ellison. Mm-hmm. Keith Ellison has this position that somehow if you decriminalize criminals, that they will commit less crimes, that crime comes from only a place of only opportunity. And so I think that when you put everything into this bucket, you have the Chessup Boudins of the world, you have the Keith Ellisons of the world. They're like, if we just, stop over-policing people, people will act right. What do you say to someone that's like, well, that's a nice idea, but what's the comeback? Do you think that there's a line there that maybe you can get a little bit closer, that not so overly policed, or do you kind of set a different standard? Do you have a different philosophy of how you view people and specifically criminals?
Yeah. I think I'd give 2 answers. One is kind of very tangible, and one is kind of philosophical. Number one, you can look out and see what works. right? You
Right.
can look out to San Francisco and see the mess that San Francisco has become.
Yeah.
And,
Well, you don't
and
even
that-
have to
and-
look at
yeah.
San Francisco. Look
right here. Exactly. That's
Yeah.
right.
The drug
that's,
dens.
That's exactly right. We've seen this experiment. The Minneapolis City Council, moved $8 million or so to social work and violence interrupters and things like that. And of course, we had 100 murders in Minneapolis last year and 750 carjackings. And so we've seen the tangible results of that. Philosophically, I think one thing you could say is in the Minneapolis Charter Amendment proposal, it said we're to get rid of the minimum staffing ratios, different things, and then it had a parenthetical and it said to include police if necessary, and that to me is such utopian nonsense. Completely, the people who signed on to that, the Minneapolis City Council members, Keith Ellison, they should not. That is such a dumb idea. They should not only not be reelected again. They should spend the rest of their lives apologizing to the people of Minnesota, because there's no world this side of heaven where police will not be necessary, because human beings are fallen. Mm-hmm. They are fallen. Mm-hmm. That is, people commit wrong actions, and that's why we need police. We need police because human beings are imperfect and they do bad things. And so the explicit charter amendment that contemplates a world in which there's no police, that tells me that anybody who supports that is disconnected from reality. And so that's the very philosophical point. But
that's been his life work. I mean, talk about when he was an attorney and some of the people that he defended.
Yeah. I mean,
you want to talk about, when I say there is a long tradition that you're going to have to work with law enforcement to build that relationship back.
Yep.
We have an attorney general right now that has defended certain people, and I'll let you speak about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is an attorney general who, when he was in private practice, represented a man who was implicated in the execution of Jerry Hoff. He represented Sharif Wilson in another matter.
He was a Minneapolis cop.
He was a Minneapolis cop. Executed simply because he was a cop. And represented Sharif Willis. He represented, a cocaine dealer who murdered 3 people and so forth. And I mean, we can have, we need criminal defense attorneys are part of our system and so forth. We can have them. But what my criticism of Ellison is that he's brought that mentality of a criminal defense attorney to the Attorney General's office, where he is far more focused on the rights of criminals than the rights of victims. And with that comes a certain hostility to law enforcement. You see it permeate his time as Attorney General. You've seen it permeate his entire career. He stand up. Did a rally alongside Sarah Jane Olsen, Kathleen Celaya, a domestic terrorist. You see this throughout his career, and he's extreme. He's extreme. There's no other way to describe him, and he has demonstrated throughout his career a remarkable hostility to law enforcement.
Now, this might sound like I'm a step too far ahead, and I can completely respect that. But my question is, do you think that there can be a point from the Attorney General's perspective that if you have too much of a police presence, right? Like,
yep.
I think that there's this balance, right, where you have to find a good place.
Yeah.
But as Attorney General, if you feel that it's going too hard one direction, that these crackdowns are hardcore, what could you do, or do you think that there is a role for the Attorney General if you feel that things are being, let's say, over enforced too much? How would you handle that?
Yeah. So I'd say, a few things. Of course, any criminal conduct, right? And I would categorize, Derek Chauvin's actions as criminal conduct. Actions along those lines. I would work with county prosecutors to aggressively prosecute. We cannot have criminal conduct by folks in law enforcement. That's incredibly rare, as we all know. But we can't have it, and we'll hold accountable law enforcement who does engage in that. But we of course know it's incredibly rare. Alongside that. We have to partner. I think the Attorney General's office can be a real part of the solution in terms of ensuring that communities that have buy-in into the law enforcement that are taking place in their communities. And we're really working to partner with communities. Jai, I know you know this well as somebody who's worked in law enforcement for many, many years. But really ensuring that there's a real partnership between police and folks in communities, because not everything that police do, day to day is perfect, and we have to ensure that there is an ongoing dialogue between folks in communities and folks in law enforcement. And the AG's office I'm not going to pretend that we are the the central place, kind of day to day, in that dialogue. But I think there's an important seat at the table for the AG's office because
I don't think it should be.
Yeah,
but it has been because that's what Ellison does. He's this activist attorney general.
Yep.
Where I think that people they want an attorney general that actually does what the attorney general is supposed to do.
Yeah.
If you want to be that political activist, then go be a political activist.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
Well, he will come January.
Exactly.
He'll get a shot, man. He'll be back out there.
That's right. That's right.
You said something about the criminal division
Yeah.
has 3 attorneys in it right now.
Yeah.
What would you like to see that number grow to? Do you have a range that you think would be acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need at least 30. And then we'll reevaluate once we're staffed to that manner. We'll reevaluate over time, whether or not we need more. But we need at least that. This is a big state, lots of counties, lots of we're living through an historic increase in violent crime, as we all know, and we need at least that to be a real partner for county attorneys. There's cases we can bring directly under RICO and otherwise, but to be a real partner for county attorneys out there, and so that's the size I'm envisioning right now.
When it comes to the grind of campaigning, you're out there, you're talking to people. For you, how do you try and separate not taking all that baggage home, man? Because I imagine as you've been out there, you've heard some pretty terrible things of misjustices that have happened to people. And, even I would say those personal stories, like, is there anything that you do? Do you like to listen to music to kind of decompress and decompartmentalize, or do you just take it as energy and it moves you forward? Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I mean, there is, I sat with a month or so ago, I sat with a Latino woman whose husband had just been killed by street racers, or maybe a week earlier or so, or something like that. And it's stories like that. And I'm sure Jai, as somebody you've made a career in law enforcement, I'm sure you've had many such conversations. And I can't say I found a kind of perfect. I mean, it's a means to let go of a lot of that. It does stay with you. I would say, I'm a person of faith, and I take my faith very seriously, and I try to take the burdens of life generally to the God I believe in, and try to leave them with Him, and because there's just some things that you're not strong enough yourself to lift, and so you gotta leave them there. And so that's what I do. I can't say that I'm perfect. I can't say that I walk in every night to my family and I'm not thinking about the last conversation and so forth. But that's at least what I do. But I should get some advice from Jai on that.
What do you do, Jai?
Yeah. Oh well, we only have an hour. But I mean, you're on the road a lot. You're probably doing a lot of quick stops here or there, and I think our producer may have have a video of one of your favorite spots that you like to frequent.
Oh, is that right? Yes.
Yeah. So if we have that video ready, Gabe, we'll take a look at it. But
right.
I want to know also what kind of music you listen to. You're on the road a lot.
Yes.
We had a country singer in here the other day. And he had the whiskey, wine, and beer challenge.
And I crushed it.
If you want to do that tonight, we'd be happy to get that set up for you. But I think you have other events after this. That's right.
Yeah, well, on the road, I'll be honest with you, on the road these days, I'm like hardly listening to anything because I got somebody usually driving me, and I'm just making phone calls to people to ask for votes or to ask for people to contribute to the campaign or to talk with, do an interview thing here and there. So not too much music on the road, but I will say in terms of music these days, Mumford and Sons. I've been listening when I'm working out and stuff. That I've been doing that. Let's see. Growing up, I listened to kind of like a lot of alternative stuff, Foo Fighters,
right,
things like
You're
that.
You're a Foo fan?
Here we go.
Yeah. You know what's funny?
Here we go.
So, I was telling you about, we know the same family.
Yeah.
I actually brought him and his wife to the Foo Fighters concert like 5 years ago because where I used to work, we bought into a suite as a corporation, and all the agents bought into it. I'm a huge
Is that right?
Foo fan.
Is that right?
Yeah, man. So we could be just rocking and jamming, man.
My first concert ever was when I was like in 10th grade or so at the Target Center, the Foo Fighters. So they go way back for me.
So this is what I love about having these conversations is like, yes, being running for Attorney General and I think you'll win. It's some serious stuff, but you're also a human being, and I think it's important for people to understand. So if our producer has that video pulled up, I think this is a great great example of the humanity.
Hi, I'm Keith Schultz, your candidate for Minnesota Attorney General. I'm outside the Arby's here in St. Louis Park. I've taken a lot of criticisms. I am a firm supporter of Arby's. I love Arby's. I love the fries. I love the roast beef sandwiches. I used to go growing up, get the 5 for $5.95 deal. So I love Arby's. I've taken a lot of criticism, but I'm not a politician. I'm not going to have my finger to the wind over time. Even if I get the criticism, I'm going to support Arby's. It's a great institution, and I really love Arby's. See you guys.
So you gotta give us like.
Did they pay you for that? First of all,
right.
You should probably get paid.
I really should. I should get paid for that, Jai. You're right. I get some criticism. My team criticizes me for my Arby's. I rank them as the number 2 best fast food. I love McDonald's is number 1. Arby's after that, and then Wendy's and Culver's are tied for 3rd for me. But so I'm always on the campaign trail. I always asking them to stop, and if Arby's is there, that's at the top of the list, towards the top of the list. And so, but yeah, the roast beef sandwich. I grew up in by St. Cloud. We used to go to this Crossroads Mall in St. Cloud, get the 5 for $5.95. 5 roast beef sandwiches at once. It was awesome. But yeah. So I'm a big fan, and I know these days though, like people, my team always says, "Oh, Arby's is terrible," things like that. But I don't know if you guys have a position on Arby's, but I certainly.
So my wife is a huge Arby's fan. Her father, for a time, I think he was either a franchise owner or he was like a general manager. Wow. And so like my wife has always loved Arby's. Now I grew up in Devil's Lake, North Dakota.
Okay.
We didn't have an Arby's. So McDonald's was my go-to jam.
Yeah.
I was okay with Dairy Queen once they switched over to the grill and chill.
Yeah.
But I do like me some Arby's, and they right now have like a really cheap special. So you're able to actually get a bunch of Arby's roast beefs, get some horsey sauce.
Oh,
Are you a horsey guy?
Absolutely.
Are you a horsey or Arby's guy?
Oh yeah, I like Arby's.
Where's your go-to spot?
My go-to right now would be Taco Bell. Late night. It's I'm
not a Taco Bell fan.
I'm gonna have to see what Keith Ellison likes.
I
just lost the vote. Boy, that's not good.
I will say their nacho fries are pretty decent, man. Like they came back. They had them out for a while, and then they were all crazy, and they left, and then they came back. Baja Blast is a jam, but to me, like quite literally, every burrito from Taco Bell tastes the same to me. Yes. It's either like this is the chicken burrito, and I don't care what else you put on it, it has the same taste. But when you do Arby's, like all their sandwiches taste different. Plus, they got the meat.
See, this is what happens when you do a podcast with 2 big guys, and we just start talking food, and then we forget that we have Attorney General race going on. So we'll go back.
You want to take the next hour talking about fast food? I'm more than willing. So
I actually wanted to mention this too. You and I ran in somewhat similar circles when we were in college. So I was at the University of Minnesota basically from 2005 5 into 6, actually no, 6 until 10, and I was part of an organization called the College Republicans, and I was at the U of M, but St. Thomas always had a pretty active chapter, which makes sense, because they're tend to be more conservative, at least back then, than the very liberal U of M. So like we ran in like similar circles. And the reason I like to just mention this is that it's important to understand that these caricatures that keep getting drawn of who candidates are sometimes so far off basis, and that's what it is. The other thing I wanted to say too, you probably don't remember because you've talked to a million people, but for me it's the first time I ever talked to you. You called me when you were running, seeking endorsement, and you were actually the only Attorney General candidate running for the Republican endorsement that called me, and we had probably a 40-minute conversation, man, and I was like, mad respect because you were grinding. So the fact that you're bringing that forward. So I just wanted to kind of ask you, your life did not start down this path where here you are running for Attorney General. How do you bring that same passion and faith that you had, that kind of how you started your life when you're going in your professional career to where you're at right now?
Yeah. I'd say from the beginning of this campaign, we just were kind of on a mission to get it done, and we were willing to walk through whatever walls we needed to do it. And, yeah, as you meant, in the lead up to the Republican endorsement, I was making a ton of phone calls to folks like yourself, and there's some days where I think there was a day I made 170 phone calls in a single day, and made many thousands through the course of the endorsement, and then of course calling others, as well, donors, things like that throughout the race, and I grew up in rural Minnesota, in kind of farm country. My parents didn't have a farm, but but kind of farm country. I grew up working on farms. My first job was tasseling seed corn, which is, anybody who's done it is a very, very uncomfortable job, hard job. And I just kind of learned how to work hard in that setting. And I've kind of just learned through life that you can make up for lots of, of weaknesses by just working hard and grinding. And so that's been, as a campaign, we just don't want to leave anything out on the field. We don't want, we want to outwork our competitors every day of the week, and that's paid dividends for us. And we've been on a mission because we feel like, as I said, this is not a race that we can lose. We have to win for the future of our state, and so we just have worked hard to do that.
Yeah. Growing up in the rural area, now I know you live in the metro area right now, and people are getting hit with the crime. I know that on a personal level with your sister.
Yeah.
And what happened to her. I believe she lives in North Minneapolis.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you tell our listeners how that affected her?
Yeah. So to tell the story, she was sitting down to her breakfast table one morning in January of 2021, and she heard gunshots outside her home. She dropped to the floor. She couldn't see it, but a man had careened his car into her yard. He had been on a chase with police, and he was shooting out his back windows at police who were returning fire. A police officer had to rush into her house to get her out of there at one point so that a stray bullet wouldn't hit her. The end result was multiple bullet holes in her home. She was not struck, but I still remember her calling me that morning in tears, and I remember meeting with the BCA that night, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. That night, she stayed with us for a few nights because she didn't feel safe in her home, and that day is going to be with her all her life. Yeah. And it's representative of the level of violence in North Minneapolis right now and many other parts of the Twin Cities, and that sort of, of course, her story ended up, it's going to be with her, but it ended up okay. She was not struck, she wasn't killed. But but a lot of people haven't been so lucky.
Well, that's on a family level. You'll never forget that.
Yeah.
And we have the U of M right here in our backyard that we have families sending their kids not only from just Minnesota, from all over this country, wanting them to get the best education and be safe at the same time and be able to go out and enjoy college experience. I had a friend of mine whose son was jumped for his cell phone, after bar close. And what would you say to those parents that are very concerned right now about the safety of their kids that are going off to college?
Yeah. I mean, of course, the U has had really, a lot of challenges around public safety. I think it was deeply wrong. They severed ties with the police department in a couple of years ago, and I'm glad they have re-signed, with the police department. And I think things can get better. I think it's important that we have change in 2022 and have leadership that will prioritize safety throughout Minnesota, especially and also at the U of M. We have to make sure that kids can feel safe, there. And right now I know a lot of people don't.
How do you envision the Attorney General's office helping in those kind of situations?
Yeah,
what aid could you assist the U of M?
Yeah. I mean, I would say broadly, it's part of the whole of supporting law enforcement within the metro. Part of the challenge we have in Minneapolis is we're down, as a few hundred police officers, and I can't hire my those police officers myself as Attorney General, but I can certainly be a voice supporting law enforcement. But you have to stop the bleeding. There's been incredible attrition in that police force and in other police forces. People leaving law enforcement in part because they've been slandered, they've been vilified by many people in public office, and so we need people to stand up as public leaders to say law enforcement is critical to the future of Minnesota. We cannot be these days of slandering and vilifying law enforcement are over, and we're gonna have their back. We're gonna support them. Obviously, if wrongdoing is done, we'll hold people accountable. But that's so incredibly rare, and we're gonna support them every day of the week. And so to provide real leadership, provide leadership at the legislature. We need resources for a lot of things. There was a public safety package that died last year. Keith Ellison, again, was missing in action in terms of pushing it through, but it was resources for things like carjacking, resources for hiring and retention bonuses for law enforcement in Minnesota to help ensure that we have the folks we need. And so I would think of, strategies around the U of M, as it relates to the AG's office anyway, as being comparable to strategies for the Metro as a whole, that we need more police officers and we need more criminal prosecution, so that criminals know, again, that there actually are consequences for crime. Because right now, so many criminals feel like there's not consequences.
They're emboldened. I want to point out just a couple of comments from people that are watching at home. Again, thank you so much. Kathy, Jai and I appreciate the praise that you're heaping on us. 100% we want to be able to have meaningful conversations, maybe from a different way than most people look. Just looking at myself and Jim sitting here, I'm wearing a hoodie and just being casual, and Jim is out here showing his best foot forward, putting his best face forward. But honestly, we want to have these types of conversations that are meaningful and that go more than just hearing an interview. I'm sure, Jim, you've given a bunch of really great interviews. I know that people can go and visit your website. We've been kind of flashing that up so they can look at some of your more specific policy positions. But what we really try and do on the show is dive more into things to kind of showcase who you are as a person. Of course, policy matters, and you've been talking a lot about how important it is to support law enforcement. I know that we also had another commenter, Cotter, last name. I wish I remember what the first name was, but asked a question that we kind of already addressed. So Richard Cotter, thank you very much, talking about the U of M, and I think you guys really did nail it. But it does come back to this question of leadership, and in the AG's office, you have such a loud voice to be able to really hold leadership in kind of like in the same vein. Because would you describe that the Attorney General is the top,
law enforcement,
mm-hmm.
Chief
figure,
law enforcement officer
in the state, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's like if you're quiet and you're not saying anything, then you're sending a signal. That is a signal that you're not there to do and uphold what the law is.
Yeah.
And that's what we've had.
That's
for 4 years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And Tim Christopher Rev, he did ask a good question, and I kind of set it back, and sometimes we kind of get off a track here, which is good because I think it's good to have a flowing conversation. But is there any worry from your perspective, or have you heard any worry that, let's say that we staff back up to all the levels we need all across the state, are there things that you are going to have your office make sure that if people do have complaints with the very small percentage of bad apples.
So like reform, right?
Yeah, reform. Where do you feel that your office can help with that or make sure that there's still an open channel of communication?
Yeah. I mean, the police departments always can be improved. They're a reflection of humanity, and humanity is imperfect. And we have to, where there are areas for improvement, where there are failings, we have to address them. And there's failings. There's failings in the AG's office. We have to address those. There's failings in other parts of our government, and we have to continue to address those. And there are statutory. I think we have to look for ways in which statutory changes. There has been positive developments. I think I was supportive of the ban on warrior style training that happened coming out of the George Floyd killing. I think the murder of George Floyd, the ban on chokeholds, things along those lines. I do think we have to look for ways in which, whether it be legislatively or in terms of training or otherwise, where we can continue to improve our police departments. And it's not like we're saying it's all just law and order. We have to ensure that we're real partnership with communities, that we're working to address in certain instances some underlying causes, mental health things along those lines, that there's adequate resources for folks. I've got a brother who's seriously mentally ill. I know that is something that touches a lot of people's lives, and of course does meaningfully impact crime. And so aggressive prosecution, policing, and so forth are a critical element of the solution to our violent crime problems, but they're not the only solution. And so we have to ensure that we're addressing it holistically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and supporting law enforcement includes reform as well. And I think people in public safety know that. I know my partners do, and I'm very proud to be a part of that group that understands that we need reform. So it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, Ian, honestly, it's been awesome having you on the show, Jim. I know that you do have, more work to do. You're out there, like you said, you're a grinder. Even just the short time that we've been able to spend together on top of the hour-long conversation we had before, I know that you're out there and like you said, you have that conviction that you have to win, and I know that you're going to do that for the state. For anyone, again, that's watching or listening, please visit Jim's website, jim4mnag.com, jim4mnag.com, to be able to see what you got going on. Is there anything you want to shout out before you have to leave?
I'll just say, please do join with us in this campaign. We're on a mission to deliver greater safety for all Minnesotans, black, brown, or white, rich or poor, every walk of life. And we're going to get it done. We have to get it done for the future of our state, and just ask for your support.
Debate tomorrow?
Debate tomorrow, yes, on TPT Almanac in the evening, and on TPT Almanac, I think it's 6 p.m., 7 p.m., something like that. And then on Sunday on KSDP in the evening as well.
Great. And awesome. You and I have an early morning tomorrow.
Yeah, we have an early morning. We actually have to. We don't have to. We want to, but we're going to be on Twin Cities News Talk tomorrow morning at
about 7 a.m. So tune in to that.
So you can either listen on AM 1130 or FM 103.5. Just depends on where you're at. And you can also listen on online iTunes, I think. So
yeah, so Jim, be sure to call in tomorrow.
Deal. I like it. Sounds good. Well, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
And before we end the show here, I know that we're probably throwing this out here on our producer Gabe, but whenever I think about someone that hates cops for being cops, I want them to think about this.
Look, if you hate cops just because they're cops, the next time you get in trouble, call a crackhead.
That's right. I'm AK Kamara.
I'm Jai Hansen.
You've been listening to Black and Blue with AK and Officer Jai. See you next time.